The mining colony of Astra 9 sat under a sky that never showed a true color. It was always red, filled with dust and the glow of the planet's heat. The people who lived there worked hard every day, digging deep into the ground to collect plasma crystals. These crystals powered ships and cities across the stars. Life was tough, but the colonists were strong and proud of what they did. That was before the dragon came. The first time the creature appeared, it came from the upper clouds like a burning comet. At first, the people thought it was a meteor or a ship in trouble. But when it spread its wings, everyone realized it was alive. The dragon was enormous, its scales glowing like molten metal, and its eyes shone brighter than the suns that lit the system. It screamed across the sky, and the sound shook the ground. Then it released fire, hotter than anything the miners had ever seen. The sky itself seemed to burn. The colony's defense drones were sent up immediately. They fired lasers and plasma bursts, but nothing worked. The dragon cut through them like paper. Some drones exploded before they even got close. Within minutes, half the colony's power grid was gone. The people ran for cover as buildings caught fire and alarms rang through every street. After that day, the dragon came again and again. It never stayed long, but each time it appeared, it destroyed something new. The people started calling it Varath, the fire above. The name spread quickly, whispered in fear. Children woke up crying from dreams of red wings and burning skies. Farmers near the colony's edge abandoned their crops and fled to the central domes for safety. The colony's commander, Captain Mara, tried everything. She ordered traps, heavy cannons, and flying hunters with special plasma weapons. Every plan failed. Varath seemed to learn from each fight. It avoided traps, struck from different angles, and always escaped into the sky before the soldiers could regroup. No one could explain where it came from or why it attacked. Scientists said it might be an alien species drawn to the heat from the mining reactors. Others said it was a guardian of the planet, angry that humans had disturbed its home. For the miners, those words didn't matter. What mattered was that every attack took lives. The colony's production slowed down. Food became scarce. People started leaving on transport ships whenever they could. Those who stayed lived in fear. No one dared to work near the surface anymore. The red sky, once just a sign of Astra 9's beauty, had become a warning. Among the people still working was a young mechanic named Ethan. He wasn't a soldier or a scientist. He fixed machines, cleaned engines, and repaired broken drones. His job was small, but he was good at it. When the attack started, he volunteered to help repair the damaged sensor drones that tried to track the dragon. It wasn't easy work. The drones came back melted or smashed, their data cores barely working. Still, Ethan tried to find clues. He looked through the readings, trying to understand how Varath moved and what it was looking for. One evening, while Ethan was working in the repair bay, he noticed something strange in the data logs. The dragon's attacks weren't random. Each time, it had flown near the colony's plasma vents, massive structures that released heat from the deep mines. It never attacked people directly unless they tried to fight it. The pattern made him think. Maybe Varath wasn't attacking to destroy, but to protect something. He wanted to tell the commander, but who would listen to a simple mechanic? That night, Ethan stood outside the repair bay and looked up at the red sky. The clouds glowed faintly with the heat from the vents. Somewhere up there, the dragon was watching. He could almost feel it. The air was heavy and warm, and for a moment, the colony was silent. No alarms, no engines, just the distant hum of the planet itself. He wondered if the creature was alone. Was it the last of its kind? Did it understand what humans were doing? He had no answers. All he knew was that fear had taken over the colony. People no longer talked about fixing things or building a better future. They only talked about surviving the next attack. Then, as he turned to go back inside, a faint roar echoed through the sky. It wasn't loud like before. It sounded weak, almost like a groan. Ethan froze. He looked up and saw a shadow move across the clouds. The shape was familiar. Wings wide, glowing faintly in the dark. But instead of fire, he saw flickers of blue light, like sparks dying out. For the first time, the dragon didn't look like a monster. It looked tired. Ethan stood there for a long time, watching until the shape vanished into the horizon. Something about that moment stayed with him. He didn't feel afraid. He felt sorry. He didn't know it yet, but that night would change everything. Because the next time the dragon came, it wouldn't be a fight. It would be a meeting, one that would make history on Astra 9. Days turned into weeks, and the fear in Astra 9 grew heavier. Every sunrise was greeted with silence, as if the colony itself was holding its breath. The dragon, Varath, returned again and again. Sometimes it appeared once a week, other times twice in a single night. The people never knew when it would come. The warning sirens had become part of daily life. Each time the red lights flashed, everyone ran to the shelters underground, waiting for the sound of wings and fire. Captain Mara stood at the command tower almost every night. She had deep lines under her eyes from lack of sleep. Her team watched the radar screens closely, trying to track the dragon's movements. It was fast, too fast for their scanners to lock onto for long. The defense teams had begun to lose hope. Drones and ships were expensive, and most were already destroyed. Each time they built a new one, Varath tore it apart with a single blast of heat. The people blamed Mara. They said she didn't know what she was doing, that she was leading them all to ruin. But she never stopped trying. She wasn't a coward, only desperate. Her crew knew that she cared about the colony more than anyone. She had lost soldiers, friends, and good pilots, but she still stood at her post every night, watching the burning clouds. Ethan continued his quiet work in the repair bay. He fixed what could be saved from the attacks. The machines were battered and covered with ash, their metal warped from heat. He often worked alone late into the night. His hands were always dirty, and his clothes smelled like burned oil. But while he worked, his mind kept going back to the dragon. He couldn't stop thinking about that last night, when the creature's fire had turned blue and weak. No one else had noticed it, or maybe no one cared. But he did. He began collecting pieces of data from the drones that had survived, sneaking time in the control room when no one was looking. The patterns confirmed his thoughts. The dragon never struck humans unless they attacked first. It focused on the plasma vents and the reactors that produced energy for the colony. It wasn't acting like a beast hunting prey. It was acting like something in pain or something defending its territory. Meanwhile, the scientists at Astra 9 were arguing about what to do. Some wanted to try communication. Others believed that the creature was too dangerous. The most powerful voice belonged to Dr. Soren, the head of research. He believed the dragon was a biological weapon from an ancient war. "It's not an animal," he said in one meeting. "It's a weapon that doesn't know peace. The only answer is to destroy it before it destroys us." Captain Mara agreed. The next mission, she decided, would be their last attempt. They had built a new weapon, a high-powered plasma cannon placed on the ridge north of the colony. It could fire a single massive shot, strong enough to melt through a mountain. If it hit Varath, it would be the end of the creature once and for all. The people of Astra 9 waited for the day of the strike like prisoners waiting for judgment. Ethan heard the plan while repairing a transport ship. His chest felt heavy. He wanted to believe it would work, but something inside him said it was wrong. He remembered the sound of the dragon's breath, the way it had looked weak, almost sad. He didn't see a monster that night. He saw a living thing that was suffering. But he couldn't say that out loud. No one would believe him. To them, the dragon was the enemy. The day before the weapon was to be tested, the sky over Astra 9 turned darker than usual. Red lightning flashed far off in the distance. The colony's weather towers couldn't explain it. Mara thought it might be a storm, but Ethan, standing outside near the storage yard, had a different feeling. The air was too still. Felt like the calm before something big. And then he heard it, the faint rumble of wings. The alarms began to scream. People ran through the streets, shouting, grabbing children, closing blast doors. Ethan looked up. Varath was descending again, larger and brighter than ever. Flames rolled off its wings, lighting the sky like a second sun. The dragon wasn't attacking this time. It flew low, circling the colony, roaring with a sound that shook the ground. It sounded angry, yes, but also hurt. Captain Mara ordered the cannon to be powered up. The ground shook as the weapon charged, building a glow that could be seen for miles. Ethan stood frozen as he watched from the yard. The dragon swooped lower, heading straight for the plasma vents again. It was exactly as the data showed. It wasn't coming for people. It was coming for the heat, for the pain that burned inside it. And then, just as the cannon reached full power, Ethan made a decision that would change his life. He ran. He didn't know why, only that something deep inside told him the dragon didn't deserve to die like this. While everyone else hid underground, Ethan ran toward the storm and the fire, toward the thing everyone feared most. He didn't know what he would do when he reached it, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't let them fire. Ethan didn't stop running until he reached the edge of the colony. The sky was glowing red and orange, and the wind was full of dust and heat. Sirens echoed through every building, and the ground shook from the power of the plasma cannon charging on the ridge. He knew he shouldn't be there, but he couldn't go back. He felt like the dragon's roar was calling him, not to fight, but to understand. He found cover behind a large pile of metal parts near the outer fence. From there, he could see everything. The dragon circled above the colony, wings wide, its fire spilling like rivers of light. It didn't attack the people. Instead, it roared at the vents, the giant towers that released burning air from the mines below. Every time one of them flared, the dragon's cry grew louder. Ethan could see now it wasn't rage. It was pain. Up on the ridge, Captain Mara stood next to the cannon's control team. Her hands were shaking, though she tried to hide it. "Target the creature," she ordered. "Wait for my signal." The soldiers locked the weapon on Verath. The barrel glowed a bright blue as energy built inside it. The entire mountain hummed with power. Ethan's heart raced. He had to stop them somehow. But how could one mechanic stop the entire defense force? He looked around and saw a maintenance transport parked nearby. It was small, but it had a communication unit that could reach the command tower. He ran inside, started the console, and opened a direct channel. "Captain Mara," he said, trying to sound calm. "It's Ethan from the repair bay. Please listen to me. Don't fire. The dragon isn't trying to destroy us." There was silence for a few seconds. Then Mara's voice came through, sharp and angry. "Ethan, what are you doing on this channel? Get to the shelters." "That's an order." "Captain, please," he said. "I've studied the patterns. It always flies near the plasma vents. It's not attacking people, it's drawn to the heat. There's something wrong with it. Maybe it's hurt." "Enough," she snapped. "That thing has killed too many already. We can't risk another attack." Before Ethan could reply, a new voice cut in. It was Dr. Soren. "The mechanic is wasting your time, Captain. Fire the cannon before it gets closer." Ethan slammed his hand against the console. "You don't understand. If you shoot it, you'll make everything worse." But no one was listening. He looked out the window and saw the cannon's glow reach its peak. The air trembled. The dragon let out another roar and turned toward the ridge. Then, without thinking, Ethan grabbed the transport's emergency flare launcher. He ran out into the open, past the fences and toward the vents. The wind burned his skin, but he didn't stop. He loaded a flare and fired it straight into the sky. The bright green light shot upward, bursting near the dragon's path. For a moment, the creature turned its head, its eyes catching the glow. Captain Mara saw it too. "Who's out there?" she shouted over the comms. "Get them off the field." The cannon crew hesitated. "Ma'am, someone's in the line of fire." Ethan waved both arms, shouting even though no one could hear him over the storm. "Don't do it. Please," he cried. "It's not your enemy." The dragon's eyes locked on him. Time seemed to slow. He could feel its gaze, heavy and ancient, like it could see straight into him. Then, something unexpected happened. The dragon stopped. It hovered in the air, wings beating slow and steady. The blue light under its scales flickered weakly. Ethan took a cautious step forward, raising his hands. He didn't know what else to do. "It's okay," he said softly, though his voice shook. "You don't have to fight." On the ridge, Mara watched in disbelief. "Hold fire," she said quietly. Her team stared at her. "I said hold fire." The cannon's energy began to drop. For the first time, the dragon wasn't attacking, and someone was standing right in front of it. The storm around them calmed. The heat faded a little. The dragon lowered itself slightly, landing near the outer vents. Its wings folded back, and smoke rose from its body. Ethan could see a long wound across its side, glowing like hot metal. He stepped closer, slowly. The creature growled, a low rumble that shook his bones, but it didn't strike. Ethan stopped a few meters away. "You're hurt, aren't you?" he whispered. The dragon tilted its head, almost like it was listening. He took another step. The air around it shimmered with heat, but he didn't turn away. "I don't want to hurt you," he said. "I just want to help." For a long time, neither of them moved. The dragon breathed heavily, its eyes glowing dimly. Then it lowered its head, pressing one massive claw against the ground. To Ethan, it looked like a bow, a gesture of trust. He couldn't believe it. The creature everyone feared was right in front of him, and it was surrendering, not to power, but to kindness. Up on the ridge, Captain Mara whispered, "What in the stars?" Her soldiers stood frozen, unsure whether to cheer or run. The cannon powered down completely. The battle that had seemed endless was suddenly quiet. Ethan stayed there, standing before the great creature, his heart pounding. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for sure. Everything was about to change. The war with the dragon was over, and a new story was beginning. One that started not with weapons, but with a single act of mercy. The night after the cannon was powered down, Astra 9 was silent. No one dared to speak of what they had seen. The images spread quickly across the colony's network. Ethan standing before the dragon, unharmed, as the creature lowered its head like a beaten storm. Some said it was a trick, others said it was a miracle. Captain Mara locked herself in the command tower, replaying the footage again and again. Every time she watched it, she felt the same chill down her spine. The dragon hadn't been defeated. It had chosen to stop. Ethan didn't sleep that night. His hands still shook, and the heat from the dragon's breath lingered on his skin. He couldn't forget the way it had looked at him, like a wounded animal, not a monster. Early the next morning, before the sun's light reached the red horizon, he packed a small bag with tools, medical gel, and a power lamp. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. He knew if he asked for permission, they'd stop him. So he left quietly and followed the trail of scorched earth where the dragon had gone. The land beyond the colony was rough and dangerous. Cracked stone and blackened soil stretched for miles. The air was dry, and the wind carried the smell of ash. Ethan walked for hours, guided by faint marks on the ground. Huge footprints melted into the rock. Each one was bigger than a house. He stopped often to rest, his throat dry, but he kept going. He had to find Varath. When the sun began to set, he saw something in the distance. A large shape lay across a ridge, half hidden behind clouds of smoke rising from the ground. As he got closer, his heart started to pound. It was the dragon. Its body shimmered faintly in the fading light, scales cracked and dull. One of its wings was torn, the glowing lines that once pulsed with fire now flickering weakly. The great creature that had ruled the sky looked broken. Ethan moved slowly, careful not to make sudden sounds. The dragon's chest rose and fell with deep, uneven breaths. It let out a low growl when he stepped closer, but it didn't move. He could see the wound clearly now. A long metal shard, almost a meter long, was buried deep in its side. It glowed faintly, humming with energy. It looked like a piece of a reactor core, maybe from one of the ships that had tried to attack it. He took a deep breath and spoke softly, his voice trembling. "It's okay. I'm not here to fight you." The dragon's massive eye opened slightly, golden light reflecting in the air. For a moment, Ethan thought it might burn him alive right there. But it didn't. It just stared at him, breathing slow and heavy. He took another step closer. "You're hurt," he said quietly. "That's why you came near the colony, isn't it? The heat. It keeps you alive." The dragon's tail twitched, sending a wave of dust across the ridge. Ethan knelt down, setting his bag on the ground. His hands were shaking, but he forced himself to stay calm. "I can help you, but you have to trust me." He reached for the plasma cutter in his bag. The dragon growled again, smoke curling from its nostrils. Ethan stopped and raised his hands. "Easy," he whispered. "I'm not going to hurt you. Please." He didn't know if the dragon understood him, but it lowered its head slightly and stopped growling. That was enough. Ethan worked slowly, using the cutter to melt the edges of the metal shard. Sparks flew into the air, lighting up the dark. Each time the tool touched the wound, the dragon flinched, letting out a deep, rumbling groan. Ethan kept talking softly the whole time. "You're doing great," he said. "Just a little longer." He wasn't sure if the creature could understand words, but maybe it could understand tone, kindness, patience. Finally, after what felt like hours, the shard came loose. It hit the ground with a heavy thud, leaving a faint blue glow behind. Ethan quickly applied the cooling gel over the wound. The dragon shuddered, releasing a long breath that turned into a small burst of fire above him. The air shimmered with heat, but Ethan didn't move away. He just stood there, watching as the creature's breathing slowed, becoming calm and steady. The dragon turned its head slightly toward him. For the first time, Ethan saw something in its eyes, something almost human. It wasn't anger or hate. It was relief. "You're okay now," Ethan whispered. He stepped back, wiping sweat and dust from his face. The dragon slowly lifted its wings, testing their strength. The torn one moved weakly, but it didn't seem to hurt as much anymore. It gave a low, deep rumble that sounded almost like gratitude. Ethan smiled, though his legs were trembling. "You don't have to thank me," he said softly. "Just don't burn the colony again, all right?" The dragon let out a slow, soft exhale. A wave of blue fire drifted into the sky, lighting the clouds above. It wasn't a roar of war this time. It was something gentler, like a song of peace. As Ethan turned to leave, he looked back one last time. The dragon was watching him, its golden eyes calm and steady. Then it lowered its great head to the ground and closed its eyes. For the first time since it had appeared, Astra 9's greatest terror looked peaceful. Ethan started walking back toward the colony. The red horizon glowed behind him, and he could feel warmth at his back. Not the heat of destruction, but the warmth of something alive and grateful. He didn't know what would happen next, but deep inside, he knew one truth. The dragon had changed, and so had he. The next morning, the red light of Astra 9's sun crept over the ridges. Ethan was still out near the dragon's resting place, his clothes covered in dust and sweat. He hadn't slept, too afraid the creature might move or disappear if he closed his eyes. But when the light touched the rocks, Veyrath stirred slowly, lifting its head. Its eyes opened, glowing faintly gold again. For a moment, Ethan felt that same rush of fear, but it passed as the dragon only looked at him and rumbled softly, like a low greeting. Ethan smiled weakly. "Morning," he said. His voice was hoarse from the heat and dust. "How are you feeling?" Of course, he didn't expect an answer. The dragon blinked slowly, then turned its gaze toward the distant colony, the domes shining faintly in the sunlight. It gave a deep sigh, and a thin wisp of blue fire drifted from its mouth, curling into the air. Ethan stepped closer. "You were never trying to destroy us, were you?" he asked quietly. "You just wanted the heat, the energy from the vents. That's what's been keeping you alive." He spoke gently, as if explaining it to himself more than to the dragon. "We thought you were attacking, but you were just hurting." The dragon made a low sound, deep and rough, but softer this time. Ethan didn't know what it meant, yet somehow it felt like an answer. He set his tools back into his bag and wiped his hands. "I wish they could see you like this," he said. "Maybe then they'd understand." He looked at the wound again. The cooling gel had hardened, sealing the torn scales. The area still glowed faintly, but the bleeding had stopped. Ethan walked around the creature's side carefully, checking the damage to its wings. One was still weak, the other seemed fine. When he touched one of the broken scales, The dragon flinched slightly, releasing a low rumble. "Sorry," Ethan said quickly. "I'll be careful." He thought for a moment, then added softly, "You're strong. You don't have to be afraid anymore." The dragon tilted its head, eyes following his movements. Ethan didn't know what the creature truly understood, but it kept watching him closely, as if listening to every word. Far away in the colony, Captain Mara and Dr. Soren were preparing to send out a scout team. No one had seen the dragon return, and the sensors showed faint heat traces leading away from the ridge. Mara didn't say it out loud, but she hoped Ethan was alive. The image of him standing before the creature still haunted her. She needed to know what had happened out there. Back at the ridge, Ethan packed up his things. He knew he couldn't stay forever. Someone would come looking for him soon. He took a deep breath and looked up at the dragon. "I have to go," he said softly. "They'll be worried. But I'll come back. All right?" The dragon's golden eyes narrowed slightly. Then, to Ethan's surprise, it moved one of its claws forward, dragging it gently across the ground. The motion was slow and careful. When it pulled back, the claw marks formed a shape, a circle with a line through it. Ethan stared. It wasn't random. It was the same symbol used by the miners to mark safe zones near the vents. He laughed quietly. "You understand more than we think, don't you?" he said. The dragon rumbled softly again, and a faint spark flickered in its chest. It was weak, but it was alive. "You'll be okay," Ethan said. "Just rest." As he turned to leave, the dragon made a sound, low and deep, but clear. It wasn't a roar or a growl. It was something like a word or a note of gratitude. Ethan froze, then turned back. "Did you just talk?" he asked, smiling in disbelief. The dragon tilted its head again, then released a soft breath that rustled his hair. It wasn't speech, but it felt like an answer. Ethan raised his hand and placed it gently against one of the dragon's scales. The surface was warm, rough, but pulsing faintly with life. "Thank you," he whispered, "for trusting me." He hesitated, then added one last word, simple, quiet, and full of meaning. "Please stay safe." Something changed in the air. The dragon's eyes glowed brighter for a moment, and a wave of heat rippled outward. The clouds above shimmered, turning from red to soft orange. It was as if the creature understood that single word. It lifted its head and gave a low, almost musical sound. The ground vibrated beneath Ethan's feet, but he didn't step back. Then the dragon spread its wings. The torn one trembled, but it held. Slowly, with effort, it pushed itself up. Dust and ash flew in every direction. Ethan stepped back, covering his eyes. When he looked again, the dragon was in the air, climbing higher and higher, circling once above him. As it rose, it let out one last roar. Not of rage, but of freedom. Ethan stood there, smiling through the dust. He watched until the creature disappeared into the glowing clouds. The air around him was warm but peaceful. For the first time in months, Astrone's sky looked calm. He picked up his bag and began the long walk home. Behind him, the wind carried the faint echo of the dragon's call, soft and distant, like a promise kept. Ethan didn't know what he would say when he returned, but deep down, he knew this was not the end. Something had changed, not just in the dragon, but in him and maybe in the whole colony. Because now they all had a chance to see that even the wildest fire could be calmed by a single kind word. The colony was quiet when Ethan returned. The morning sun had already risen high, and the air was warm with the faint scent of burned rock. People stood near the gates, whispering to each other. They had seen the smoke vanish, and the sensors showed no more energy spikes from the ridge. When Ethan appeared, covered in dust and sweat, every head turned toward him. Captain Mara pushed through the crowd, her face filled with shock and relief. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft but steady. "You're alive." He gave a tired smile. "Yeah," he said. "I made it back." Dr. Soren came up beside her, scanning him quickly. "You're not hurt?" he asked. "Not really," Ethan said. "Just tired." Mara crossed her arms. "What happened out there? We lost all visual feeds. Did you see the dragon?" Ethan nodded slowly. Yeah, I saw it. The crowd fell silent. Even the sound of the wind seemed to stop. Mara's expression hardened. And? She asked. Did you drive it off? Ethan looked down at his boots. He could still feel the warmth of the dragon's scales under his hand. Not exactly, he said. It was hurt. Badly. I helped it. There were murmurs all around. One of the guards frowned. You helped it? He repeated in disbelief. That thing destroyed half our power grid. Ethan looked up, meeting Mara's eyes. No, he said firmly. It wasn't attacking us. It was feeding from the vents. It didn't mean to cause the explosions. It was desperate. In pain. Mara's brows drew together. You're saying it wasn't hostile? Ethan nodded. It was scared. Just like we were. He took a deep breath. I talked to it. I don't know how much it understood, but when I spoke to it, it stopped. It listened. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then someone in the crowd whispered, You talked to a dragon? Ethan gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. Yeah, kind of. It wasn't like talking to a person, but it understood kindness. Soren frowned, rubbing his chin. Are you saying it responded to emotion? To tone? I think so, Ethan said. It wasn't a monster. It was alive, intelligent, and it knew when someone wasn't trying to hurt it. Mara turned away for a moment, looking toward the ridge in the distance. So where is it now? It's gone, Ethan said. Flew off toward the clouds. But it's not dead. It'll live. Mara sighed. And what makes you think it won't come back? Because I asked it not to, Ethan said simply. The silence that followed was heavy. People exchanged uncertain glances. Finally, Mara shook her head. You realize how that sounds, right? She said softly. You're asking me to believe a creature that's burned through our sky for months just listen to you? Ethan met her gaze. You don't have to believe me, he said quietly. Just wait. You'll see. Mara studied him for a long time. Then she nodded slowly. All right, we'll wait. Over the next few days, life in the colony began to settle. The repair teams worked on restoring power, and the guards stayed alert, but there were no more alarms. The sky remained clear. For the first time in months, children played outside again, their laughter echoing between the domes. At night, Ethan would stand on the ridge above the settlement, looking up at the stars. Sometimes he thought he saw something far away in the clouds. A flash of gold, a streak of light, but it never came closer. It was as if the dragon was watching from a distance, keeping its promise. One evening, Mara joined him. She stood beside him in silence for a while, then said quietly, You really think it understood you? Ethan smiled faintly. Yeah, I do. She folded her arms. You're either the luckiest man alive or the craziest. Maybe both, he said with a grin. She chuckled softly, then looked out toward the horizon. You know, when you told me you wanted to work maintenance instead of security, I thought you were wasting your talent. But now, she shook her head. Maybe fixing things isn't just about machines. Ethan glanced at her. Sometimes things just need someone to listen. The wind blew softly, carrying the faint scent of iron and ash. In the distance, thunder rolled, but it was soft, gentle, like a heartbeat in the sky. Ethan smiled, knowing what it meant. Somewhere out there, the dragon still flew, free and alive. And for the first time since Astra 9 had been colonized, the sky above was no longer feared. It was beautiful. Days passed, and the colony slowly adapted to life without constant fear. But the story of Ethan and the dragon spread quickly, whispered from one worker to another, growing with each retelling. People talked about the mechanic who faced the creature alone, who had not only survived but had tamed it with kindness. Some were skeptical, some were inspired, but all were curious to see if it would return. One morning, a group of scouts reported something unusual on the horizon. A massive shadow moved against the red sky. Engines were started, and drones were launched to investigate. Everyone held their breath. As the images came in, disbelief spread through the control room. It was Varath, the dragon, which had terrorized them for months, was flying low over the valley, its wings spread wide, its scales glowing softly. But what stunned everyone more than its appearance was what it did next. The dragon descended gradually, folding its wings neatly as it approached the clearing near the central domes. It lowered its head slowly, until its massive body knelt on the ground. It was a gesture no human had ever expected. The creature that had destroyed ships and drones now submitted, not in fear of weapons, but as if acknowledging something greater than itself. Ethan ran toward the clearing, his heart pounding. He didn't need to shout. The dragon's gaze was already fixed on him. As he reached the edge of the clearing, he stood still, arms at his sides. The creature didn't move aggressively. It simply knelt, its golden eyes calm and steady. Captain Mara arrived soon after, flanked by her officers. She stopped at the perimeter, her jaw tight. "I don't believe this," she whispered. The soldiers behind her held their weapons, but their grips slackened as they watched the enormous dragon kneel in front of a single human. Ethan approached carefully. He extended his hand, unsure if the dragon understood this gesture. The massive head dipped slightly toward him. He reached out, his fingers brushing the warm, rough scales. A low, vibrating rumble echoed from the creature's chest. It was a sound of acknowledgement, respect, and perhaps even gratitude. The onlookers gasped and whispered. For the first time, the dragon was seen not as a monster, but as a living being capable of understanding. Ethan looked up at Captain Mara. "It's not about control," he said quietly. "It's about trust, and it chose to trust me." Mara's expression softened. She lowered her weapon. "I see that now," she said. "You didn't fight it. You helped it." The dragon rumbled again, this time a soft, musical sound. It remained kneeling, its body relaxed, its eyes following Ethan's movements. The colony watched in awe, realizing that the greatest terror in their skies had not been defeated by force, but by a single human's compassion. Ethan stepped back slightly and spoke, his voice calm but firm. "It will not harm anyone here. Came because it needed help, and it remembered that kindness exists. That's why it kneels. Not to me, but to what humans can be when we choose to care." For the first time in months, Astra 9's citizens felt hope. The red sky above no longer seemed threatening. The shadow that had once brought fear now represented possibility. Mara nodded slowly. "Then let it stay," she said. "And let everyone remember what happened here. Not just the fear, but the trust, the patience, the courage." The dragon remained kneeling for a few long moments before it raised its head, wings stretching wide once more. A soft wave of heat rolled across the clearing, not destructive, but warm, like a protective embrace. It let out a low, resonant sound that vibrated through the valley, then lifted into the sky, circling the colony once before disappearing toward the horizon. Ethan stood in the clearing, breathing deeply. Around him, the colony was silent, watching in awe. He realized that the dragon's kneeling had changed something fundamental. It had shown them that power is not only in strength, but in understanding and respect. That a wild creature could bend not because of fear, but because of kindness. The legend of the kneeling dragon spread quickly. Ethan became a quiet hero, respected and admired not for fighting the beast, but for seeing its pain and choosing empathy over force. And on Astra 9, the skies, once feared, became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even the fiercest fire could be calmed by the simplest human gesture. Months passed on Astra 9, and life gradually returned to normal. The power grids were fully restored, the domes were repaired, and children laughed again in the streets. The people had learned to live with the memory of Varath, but the dragon itself had become a symbol of the extraordinary power of kindness. Ethan returned to his work in the repair bays, quietly fixing drones, engines, and vehicles. He didn't boast about what he had done. He knew the story would be told and retold, but he preferred to stay in the background. Some of the younger colonists would sneak glances at him, inspired by the courage he had shown. Others whispered their thanks for the calm he had brought to their lives. Varath continued to fly in the skies over Astra 9. From a distance, it patrolled the horizon, watching over the colony. It never attacked again, and the sensors never detected aggressive energy readings from its presence. Ethan sometimes saw golden flashes in the distance and would nod silently, acknowledging the creature that had changed so much with just a gesture of care. The scientists continued to study the dragon, fascinated by its intelligence and behavior. Some argued it was a highly adaptive life form responding to its environment. Others believed it had learned something uniquely human: trust and compassion. Captain Mara often watched the skies with Ethan, quiet moments spent reflecting on how differently things could have ended. She respected him more than ever, realizing that bravery wasn't always about weapons and plans. Stories of the dragon and the mechanic spread to other colonies. Children drew pictures of the kneeling dragon and the young human who had calmed its rage. Miners and pilots told tales in hushed tones of the great beast that bowed to kindness, teaching everyone that empathy could achieve what force could not. Ethan often walked along the ridges, looking at the sunset over the red landscape. The wind carried warmth, dust, and faint traces of ash. He smiled quietly, thinking about how fragile and strong life could be at the same time. Somewhere out there, Varath soared, free, alive, and at peace. And he knew that the dragon's freedom was a reflection of the human spirit, patient, kind, and understanding. Years later, Astra 9 had become known not just for its mines, but for the story of the dragon who knelt. Scholars, travelers, and settlers came to witness the land and hear the tale. But everyone who met Ethan could see that it wasn't the story of the dragon alone. It was the story of a human who remembered the value of kindness, a simple word, and a gentle action. The colony thrived under the watch of the dragon and the quiet guidance of Ethan. The skies were no longer feared, but admired. And in every heart, young and old, lived the lesson that sometimes what power and force cannot achieve, empathy and care can. Astra 9 was a reminder that even in the most dangerous places, the courage of one human could change the course of many lives. And so, the legend of Astra 9 endured. A planet once terrified by fire and shadow, now protected by a bond between a human and a dragon, a testament to the enduring strength of kindness and the heroism of ordinary people.